should be going. All right. Well, welcome to a Y Ball Starters live preview for the Portland Trailblazers versus the Denver Nuggets. We have an early game today. Kind of weird for a West Coast playoff game, but here we are. It's a 1 p.m. Pacific tip-off. For those of you who might be tuning in who aren't familiar with us, we at the Y Ball Starters are Pacific Northwest based. So we talk all things Portland hoops and then any college team around here, Oregon, Gonzaga, Washington, et cetera, et cetera. But today we're going to be focusing on those Portland Trailblazers playing down 2-1 or 1-2, depending on how you look at it in the series. Drew, how are you kind of feeling going into this game?
I'm really curious to see. Obviously, historically, Portland's been pretty good in the Damon CJ era when it's a must-win, and today is a must-win. They absolutely cannot go down 3-1 heading back to Denver, and they know that. They've got veterans on their team that know that. Denver's adjusted the last two games after Portland outplayed them pretty obviously in game one. Portland came out looking like the better team. And Denver flipped something, and Portland didn't do a very good job of adjusting to that. So Denver was able to get games 2 and 3. Historically, it has usually taken Terry Stotts a couple games to make adjustments in the playoffs. So if that holds true, Portland, the combination of having Dame, CJ, Carmelo, Nurk in a game that they have to win at home in front of 8,000 fans, it's obviously not capacity, but still a decent amount of fans. Um, yeah, I'm really curious to see if Portland is capable of making a defensive adjustment. Obviously, part of it was just Denver was making everything in game three. Their role players stepped up. We know Austin Rivers had the huge fourth quarter.
Right.
You expect the same that you've been getting from Dame and Nurk. You hope for a little more from CJ and the bench, similar to what you got in game one. Obviously, Norman Powell was really good in game three, too. So it'll just be I'm not as worried about the offense because those 3-pointers that Portland was missing in game three, odds are they're going to at least be hitting some of those again. It's just about rotating on defense, going back to kind of that game one of let Jokic get his, but don't let those role players get super involved.
Yeah, exactly. And I think me and John, we talked about this in our post game for game three on YouTube that you got to look at the way that both teams are taking shots. Yeah, Portland shot really bad from the 3-point line in game three. And realistically, that's not going to happen again 2 games in a row. But just looking at the way that both teams are getting their shots, it's been a very stark difference in how Denver's getting their 3-pointers versus how Portland is getting their 3-pointers. One team is iso balling it the whole way, and another team is rotating they're making passes it's
Right.
just so much easier the way that Denver, and I feel like sustainable. Now that being said, will
Yeah.
Denver's lack of talent in the role players finally catch up? That I think that's something that we'll have to see.
Yeah, it will. And obviously, it's Carmelo Anthony's birthday. Happy birthday to Melo. We'll see. It's been a well documented storyline in these playoffs that he's going up against his former team. Game one was his first win in Denver since leaving the Nuggets, which was actually really surprising to hear.
That's crazy.
But maybe we'll get one of those vintage Carmelo games where he's able to come up big, especially in the fourth quarter. And I know you guys talked about this in your post game, but I'm really interested to see how they manage Cantor, Hollis Jefferson, and maybe Derek Jones Jr. If Cantor's just been such a liability, unfortunately, in these playoffs so far. He's just, especially when Jokic is on the floor, Cantor has no chance. This isn't 2 years ago where Cantor could hold his own a little bit. Now Jokic is the MVP, and he's going to make Cantor pay every time. So it'll be interesting to see if they do just try and match Nurk's minutes. I'm curious, Kendo, what do you think happens if we haven't really necessarily talked about this much on our show yet? What do you think happens if the plan is to just, Cantor's minutes are only when Jokic is off the floor? What do you think Portland's strategy should be if Nurkic gets in early foul trouble?
Man, yeah, that's the thing is for us to win, I do think Nurkic is going to have to stay out of foul trouble. Like there's really no way
Yeah.
around it. I think if Nurkic gets into bad foul trouble, we still have Dame Lillard, we still have CJ McCollum, who both are prolific scorers, especially the first.
Right.
but it makes winning very difficult. I mean, even in game three, I saw a lot of people around social media giving Nurkic a lot of flack, honestly, after the game. And yeah, he did have a couple dumb fouls, but I think that was a lot of frustration from Portland fans rather than realistically looking at the game, because I felt Nurkic played really well, and I felt like Nurkic was a big part of the reason why we were even in the game for a lot of it. His hustle plays, his
Yeah.
rebounding, second chance points, just his energy on defense. He really had outside of a couple of the dumb fouls, he had a fantastic game. Now,
Yeah.
of course, in order to have the fantastic game, you do have to be on the floor. So if Nurk does get into early foul trouble, I think it's really tough because that's a no-win situation for Portland. Canner showed that he's
Yeah.
unplayable, and Covington, as good as Covington is, I mean, the level that Jokic is on right now, Covington can't do it. He's just not big enough. No matter how good of a defender he is, he just isn't.
Right.
Um, I probably would still stick though with the Covington at 5, and Hollis Jefferson at 4, or I guess you could try Canner at 5, and having Hollis Jefferson and Covington on the floor, maybe, but then you're kind of giving up some spacing there at that point. I would probably just go Covington at the 5, honestly, and just see how that goes. I think that's what I
I
would
think
do.
I think I would too. I think I would honestly, it's unfortunate because like you guys mentioned, we can't use Derek Jones right on offense.
Mm-mm.
So that kind of negates his effectiveness in this series.
Yep.
I almost think I agree that you throw Covington at Jokic and just am like, you know what, he's gonna score in these minutes that Nurkic is off the floor, but we have to put some length on the floor to disrupt him and make sure that his passing's taken away. And Jokic actually hasn't had a crazy assist game yet. Um,
No, he hasn't. Like, I
it's
think he
been
only had like what 5 assists in game 3.
Yeah, same in game 2, and then only the one assist in game 1. So, um, I'll be curious to see, um, will we get a game where Denver just misses shots? And you don't necessarily trust Portland at this point, having this body of work seen throughout the season to make crazy defensive adjustments or be capable of that,
Right.
just because they haven't shown that they can be an elite defensive team.
No.
And they're never going to be elite with this personnel. They should be better, but they just haven't really adjusted all season. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I'll be watching. I know what Jokic is going to do at this point. It's become obvious that Jokic is going to be incredibly efficient from the floor, and that's just a lump you take with the MVP. I'll be curious to see what happens with Denver's other players because that's the key, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, Jokic is going to get his. He's proven that 3 games into the series. I don't know what his shooting percentage is so far, but I mean, it's got to be probably about 60% that he's shooting from the floor, if not higher.
Yeah, every game it seems like he hits his first 6 shots.
Me and
It's crazy.
me and John were watching the game 3 together, and it was so fun. Every time he took a shot, we're like, it's gonna go in. Like especially his 3-pointer. I've never seen a guy. You can be full length in front of his face, and he's just so tall. He's not even doing anything crazy when he shoots. He just shoots over the top of you. It's
I know.
wild. I've never seen a guy who can just shoot like that, just standing still, not even move, like leaning back a lot of times to avoid the defender. He's just shooting up and over, and it's just a swish every time.
Yeah, he's so good. That's why I think the strategy, and I think it has to some degree been the strategy for Portland. It's just unfortunately they're not quite good enough defensively to fully execute it to perfection. But I think the strategy has been, let him score his points and just don't let the other guys get involved. In game 2, Denver just wanted it more, and in game 3,
Yeah.
Denver's role players were all hitting their shots. So the recipe for Portland I don't think the recipe for Portland has changed from game 1, to be honest. I just think they haven't executed it as well, and they haven't made small adjustments, whereas Denver has made big adjustments, and that's kind of a coaching thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Mike Malone is a really good coach. I've seen some Denver fans talk about that they're not huge on Mike Malone because I think of the way I see a lot of times them complaining about how he handles his rotations. But I've thought that he's outside of game 1 where he did kind of get punked. I felt like that the last 2 games he's had a really good adjustments and done a really good job putting Denver in position to win both those games, which they have. Their players have executed. And something I was reading too, Denver just has a really good culture. Austin Rivers was
Yeah.
talking about after game 3 how he just fits in not just basketball wise, but also culture wise really well at Denver, and how they all just really communicate with each other well. They interact as a complete unit well. And I don't know if we've seen, I think the closest team that we maybe see to that that's been homegrown would be maybe like a Milwaukee, but Golden State's kind of another one of those teams. Just teams with good talent, like a star talent on them, and really good role players that's homegrown and culturally sound. That's just a really good position to be in. And it sucks because Portland has the talent and they have the culture, they just don't have that coaching to quite put it together all the way.
And I still think they need that guy that can just come. Covington's a great defender, but they need an alpha dog on the defender. And in this NBA, there's not that many of those, so that's not
No,
just
it's
like
not.
why like there's not many Draymond Greens and Marcus Smarts and obviously Milwaukee's length, even like the PJ Tuckers of the world that um they're not going to put you over the top necessarily just by themselves, but with Portland's talent, a guy like that could.
Yeah.
Honestly, with what they had with Wesley Matthews, um, back 5, 6 years ago in that era, during kind of the Aldridge era at the start of the Lillard era, Wesley Matthews was that guy that just brought so much fire and was such a bulldog defensively. And he would take the team's opposing player every time, even if the opposing player was cooking him.
Yeah.
Uh, and just that guy that's willing to do that. Covington is kind of willing to do that, but he's more of a complementary defensive piece. If Covington's your second best defender, Covington and Nurkic are 2 and 3 in whatever order they're playing in, that you can have a really good defense.
Yeah, definitely.
Because what Portland struggles with a lot is they have 2.5 good defenders on the floor, depending on who's engaged and who's not.
Hmm.
And that honestly is super interchangeable between any of the 5 main guys. Outside of they can count on Covington and Nurkic. The other 3 guys are just really interchangeable. It becomes 2.5, 3 good defenders depending on who's executing. Honestly,
Yeah.
who's putting in the effort.
Yeah,
But if you
for
could
sure.
count on another one of those guys, you can hide 2.5, one bad defender.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that Portland should have at least 3 good defenders all the time on the floor. I mean, between Robert Covington, Yusuf Nurkic, and then even Norman Powell. Norman Powell has the length, and I actually thought Powell had a fairly good defensive game in Game 3. That's the thing with Game 3, is I actually felt like a lot of the individual players had really good games. It's just CJ did not have a good game. He was getting absolutely toasted defensively, and he just has to be better. Like, there's really no other way around it. CJ just has to be better.
Yeah.
Um, and just our team our communication just is not there for some reason, and I think that's why we talk about wanting that alpha dog on defense, because Nurkic is kind of like that, where he'll communicate, but we don't have. I still don't think that he's quite the right piece in there to be that communicator, to be the guy who's giving the instructions all the time on what to do. And I don't know if that's because of his position, or also Nurk can get in his own head. So that might be part that might be part of it. Whereas like a Draymond Green's not getting in his own head.
Yeah, kind of responding to you there, Steven. I agree that we do stick Powell in the corner too much. I think there have been games where they've allowed him to get rolling, and it's true. It does take time to integrate a new guy into the system, and it'll probably be next season if we're able to retain Powell. Hopefully, we are. To get him fully integrated into the offense, just because it takes time, and a lot of times it takes a full off season. But he's a talent that Portland really hasn't had in the Damon CJ era, and we've seen the flashes to where he can be an awesome player. He did struggle with his shot a little bit in the first couple of games in Denver. But I think Portland still plays too much iso ball a lot of the time. So I don't know. It's so weird that some games they're just moving that ball around so well, and it helps when you guys are hitting shots. That's what we saw in Game 1. I just think Damian has hit so many flaws, unfortunately. just his talent, and CJ too.
Yeah.
Obviously, CJ's not quite as consistent, but he's still an amazing player. I just, yeah, it'll be interesting. But kind of moving back to Game 4 specifically, um, I think it just comes down to, do Dame and CJ and Carmelo want it? Can they will Portland to a win today? Because
Yeah.
that's kind of what a lot of times it takes in the playoffs, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Just
it
because you
is.
assume that Portland's probably going to get out coached. It's just, can Dame and CJ and the vets kind of overcome that with
But
their talent?
But man, that's just kind of what I was talking about though, is if you look at individual performances, sorry, I have a needy cat all over me. If you look at individual performances, Dame has played fantastic this series. Absolutely fantastic. Him and Jokic have been matching each other blow for blow throughout this entire series. CJ even has been scoring points. So it's not like that we're not getting offensive production from them. It's the defense. And that's where, even as good as Dame and CJ are, I mean, if you're not playing defense as a unit, you're not going to go
Yeah.
out there and get victory. So that's why I think it's a little bit more than just Dame and CJ and even Melo willing the team to victory. You're going to have the team come together and be a team and play that team defense. And it would also help too if Denver doesn't shoot 52% from the 3-point line either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, Steven. Do we know? I was looking at notifications today, and Grant, I'm looking again now. Do we know if Barton's playing?
No,
not?
I saw him. Blazers Edge had him out when I was reading their preview, but sometimes they aren't always correct. My phone, of course, died on me. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, let me see. I haven't seen anything from Casey Holdall yet. Let me see if I've got anything else for you. Because that's a big deal. Like, Barton's a big part of the series that he hasn't played.
Yeah, no, it is. And for the fact that they've been able to, it's always funny though, because you get that addition by subtraction.
Sorry to override you. It looks like he's out.
He is
looks
out.
Like Barton is out again. Yep.
Okay. What I was gonna say though is sometimes you get that addition by subtraction where Barton's a really great scorer, but maybe if he's scoring, that takes away some of the ball movement that Denver's had that's made them successful. Because Barton's not a superstar or even a star. He's a good role player. So, I mean, you never know for sure how that could influence the chemistry of the other players if you have a guy who's a really good shot maker. Maybe the other guys aren't moving around as much. Maybe the spacing. I don't know. I don't watch enough Denver regular season to make a fully educated opinion on that, but I know that can happen sometimes. So, I don't know how much better it necessarily makes them, but I mean, it probably can't hurt having an extra shooter out there.
I think he's a huge difference for them because he's a guy that can get his own shot off the bench. And he's a guy that Portland, if Austin Rivers and Facu Campazzo are making their shots, you kind of throw up your hands and are like, whatever. But Barton's a guy you have to think about. Knowing full well, oh, he can create his own shot off the dribble more consistently than Rivers or Campazzo can. I think he doesn't put Denver over the top necessarily. Portland could still win the series if Barton played games 5 through potentially 7.
No, he's not like a Jamal Murray star or anything like that.
Right. But I think that's a big guy for Denver that, honestly, if he's out today, I mean, there's just another reason on top of, obviously, you don't want to go back to Denver down 3-1, but
no,
that might be kind of out, but that's just, they have to get as many wins while Denver's a little banged up as possible because PJ Dozier's been out too, and I think he's out a little longer than Barton is. But
PJ Dozier was a big loss because that's somebody who they actually he's a good defender, and he's somebody who, Dame's played so well, I don't know how much it'd really do, but he would definitely make Dame work for it a bit more than Campazzo. I mean, he's just too small. That's just what it is. He's a good defender. He's pesky. He's the type of guy who annoys you, but he's just not skilled enough to stop somebody like Dame. Dame's just at a totally different level. But yeah, I don't know. I think the thing is, Denver's just shot so well in this series that it's like, man, what would Will Barton do? I mean, they're already making all their shots. Just another guy who's
Right.
gonna get 20 points in a game. Um, so yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how Denver shoots this game. I would imagine that there's gonna be some reversion to the mean to some degree. And I would expect Portland to shoot better from three this game. I just want to see more how our rotations are, how our ball movement is, just a lot of the other kind of key pieces that go into the offensive and defensive flow are not necessarily just the stat line.
Right. Right. Well, we'll see what happens. Tip off obviously coming up in about 25 minutes here. If you like this episode, please subscribe to us here. And we also have a Spotify channel where we post all our regular weekly podcast episodes. We've got some fun episodes coming up, some Northwest coaches and big time players. It'll be a lot of fun. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's all at Y Ball Starters. Also tune in here after the game. John and I are going to go live, kind of recapping the game, hopefully recapping a Blazers victory.
Hopefully a win.
We shall see. Thanks to everyone who tuned in again, and go Blazers.
Go Blazers.